Hello, good morning. Welcome to my kitchen. I thought that I would get on here really quickly while Chris is home before work and he can help me with these camera angles to show you how I make bagels. I'm gonna help hear Bowser walking through. It's fine. So making bagels is really easy, guys. It's nothing to get stressed or overwhelmed about. First, I'm gonna tell you our ingredients. So all you need to get started is 3 cups of total flour. I like to use half bread flour and half whole wheat flour. This is in this bag because I ground this, but I would recommend you buy white whole wheat flour from your grocery store. Obviously, you're gonna need some yeast. I buy mine from a big bulk store in a vacuum pack, and I pour some of it in a mason jar that I keep in my refrigerator, and the rest goes in my freezer. Then you're going to need salt. I like to use real salt, not iodized salt. I think that comes across too salty in your bagels. Ugh. And then you're gonna need some regular sugar, and later, when we brown our bagels, we're gonna need another sugar, but we'll talk about that then. You also need 1.5 cups of warm water, which are already in my mixer, with 1 tablespoon of instant yeast and 3 tablespoons of sugar. So if you come in closer and take a look in my mixer, I put this in here probably 5 minutes ago. So this is 1.5 cups of warm water, 3 tablespoons of regular sugar, and 1 tablespoon of my instant yeast. And it is bubbly, it is happy, so I can be sure that my yeast is awake, active, and it's gonna give me a good rise on my bread dough. So now we can start mixing our bagel dough. And if you guys are wondering, this is a Bosch Universal Plus mixer. I really like it. But you don't need to have like a big mixer to make bagels. Whatever you have or your hands will work. Usually, when I'm making sourdough, I would weigh my ingredients. But this is a very simple bagel recipe and you don't have to get all stressed about it. So I'm gonna do 1.5 cups of bread flour. I just scoop and dust it off, make sure nothing's packed in there where your bagels could be dense. Okay, so there's 1.5 cups of bread flour. You could do these 100% white flour. I don't think the texture is as chewy as when I use whole wheat. That's why I do that. But if you don't have whole wheat, or if you can't find it, or if your family would just really be opposed, go ahead and use all white, but your bagels are gonna be a different texture than mine. But it's no big deal, they're your bagels. All right, so right now I'm just gonna turn on my mixer and I'm gonna mix this up, and then we'll show you what it looks like initially. So I just scraped down the sides to make sure that all the flour can get mixed in. All right, so the initial mixing This is obviously really slack. You wouldn't be able to take this out of the bowl and knead this, but that's okay. So at this point, I'm gonna add my 1 tablespoon of salt. This is pink Himalayan sea salt, so that's why it's pink. And now I'm going to little by little add extra bread flour, just until the dough comes together and can clean the sides of the bowl on its own. Now, bagels are a very dense dough. That's why if you have a mixer with a bread or a dough hook, this is the time to use it. I mean, you'll get a workout on this dough, but we don't want this to be so dry that your bagels are not going to be nice and chewy and delicious when it comes time to eat them. So I'm just going to add a little bit of bread flour at a time until my dough comes together. Just gonna scrape this down. And see, it looks really soupy. We definitely don't want that for bagels. My mixer is kind of big, so sometimes these single batches, you have to help everything get together. Bowser, it's okay. So every time you make bread, you just need to know that the weather and your kitchen temperature really are going to matter. So today it's pretty chilly, and in Indiana, our winters can get decently dry. So I'll probably need to use a little bit more flour than I would in the summer when it's warm and humid. So just keep that in mind. That's why I'm not really telling you how much extra flour to add, because I honestly don't know. You've got to practice, learn your kitchen, learn your environment, and look for certain qualities in your dough. I'm definitely not there yet, so I'm going to keep working, but I would say as a general rule, you probably will never add more than an extra cup for 6 cups of total flour. Getting closer. So I'm just noticing a few places where dough is wanting to stick to the bottom of my bowl. So that's why I keep trying to get everything together. So at this point, our dough is starting to want to stay together, which is good. So I've probably added nearly a cup of extra flour. So I'm gonna hold off on adding anything else because it is better for your dough to be a little wet than for your dough to be dry. I can always add a little flour to my board if they're really sticky later when I'm going to shape them. I can't do anything about it if I add too much flour. So I'm gonna see what this feels like. Okay, good. So I can touch this dough. It's a little tacky, but it doesn't really stick to my fingers. It's not gonna coat my finger. So I'm gonna stop adding flour now. And all I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put my mixer onto medium speed and I'm gonna let this knead in my mixer for 5 minutes. If you were doing this by hand, you're really gonna have to do it by feel until you have a smooth and springy dough. But in a mixer on medium speed, a general rule would be around 5 minutes. Look at the recipe you're using. Generally, they'll give you some outlines, but what you're looking for is a dough that is smooth and elastic. It feels a little tacky to the touch, but it's not soupy for bagels. So we're just gonna do that and then we'll show you what the dough looks like when it's done with its 5-minute knead. So my dough has been kneading for about 5 minutes on medium speed. I don't always do this, but for those of you who don't have a mixer or who wanna know what the dough is gonna look like if you were gonna knead it in hand, I'm gonna pull it out and put it onto my counter and knead it a few times. Now you will see that there are some dry bits in here that my mixer didn't get to. Don't worry about it. And so this is still a pretty sticky dough. Don't panic and keep adding flour. If you do that, that's when you're gonna get dense, unpleasant bread. You always want to err on the side of too sticky, like I said before. And just know that when your bread finishes rising, a lot of that liquid is going to be absorbed during the rise time. So when you're kneading bread, it's really about bringing the dough forward and then pushing it away. So bring it to you, push it away. So you can see this dough wants to be together. It's not spreading out on my board. It's hanging on a little bit, not a big deal. I'm not gonna add more flour to this because it's not actually sticking. It's just tacky, and that's totally fine. So like I said earlier, you could have been doing this entire process in a bowl and then move to your board. You don't need anything special to make bagels. So other breads are not gonna, the dough is not gonna be quite this firm. It just really depends on what you're trying to make. I could probably make this dough a little stiffer and get a fine bagel. My kids like their bagels a little softer. So I don't add as much flour as I probably could. But once you play around with this base recipe, you can really do what your family likes. So if you're like, oh, I want this to be, see now my hands are warming it up, it's getting a little tacky, that's okay. If you want this to be a little firmer, add a little extra flour, see what happens. If you want this to be softer, try leaving out the whole wheat. Okay, so now I'm just gonna transfer this. This is just a regular glass bowl with cooking spray. And I, just because I think it looks nice, flip it back over and put the smooth side up. That doesn't really matter, I just always do it. So after this, I'm just going to cover this dough with some plastic wrap. I'm gonna put it in a warm place in my kitchen, and I'm gonna let this hang out for about an hour. But when we come back and I show you the next step, I will let you know how long it took us to get there. Our kitchen's about 70 degrees, which is about perfect for bread rising. So it should take an hour to an hour and a half. Okay guys, it's been about an hour. Our kitchen is really waking up now. So it's good and warm in here because we've got the coffee pot running and the ovens, the stovetop's going. So our dough has really grown in size. So a nice little trick, if you don't know if your dough has risen enough, just give it a poke. If it springs right back at you, it's not done. But if the indentation stays like that, you can be confident that your yeast has given you basically all it's gotten to give. So we're good to go on this. If our kitchen was cold, it would take longer. But our kitchen is nice and warm, so we're good. So I'm just going to turn this, well, maybe. I'm just going to turn this onto my silicone mat here. This thing is really helpful if you ever find one, or if you want to put it on your Christmas list. I got mine at Aldi. It's really good for when you need to roll something out. Love this thing. It was really cheap. All right. Now you have just some decisions to make. I'm just knocking the air out of this, but you need to decide how many bagels you want to make. If you want them to be big bakery size bagels, cut this into 8. If you want them to be more reasonable sizes, go for 12. I'm going for 8 because that just means that if I'm toasting a bagel for my kids, they each have half of one, or it makes a really good sandwich. So I just cut this in half, and then I'm gonna half each one of those, obviously being super precise. If these are gifts and you want them to look really uniform, go ahead and break out your scale and weigh them. But these are just for my family. So this one's obviously smaller. There. Those look pretty good. And like I told you guys, stickiness, not an issue. All right, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Good deal, did that right. All right, I'm gonna show you how to shape one of these. This one feels a little small, that's okay. I'm gonna show you how to shape one of these, and then I'll finish the rest off camera, and I'll come back to show you the next step. So there are different ways to shape bagels. Some people make a rope and connect it. I think that's more difficult. So I actually make it into a smooth, round ball, and then I kind of just poke a hole in the middle. So I use the palm of my hand and I just go around on my mat. This is where this comes really in handy, because if you have any texture on your countertop like we do, it'll catch in there. Like, it won't hurt your dough, but it'll be a pain to clean up. All right, so I have a nice smooth round ball now, and all I'm gonna do is rip a hole in there and pull it a little bit. If your dough is proved right and you kneaded it enough, but didn't over knead it, it will stretch for you. And you just lay it out, and then you got a bagel. While you're making the other ones, these are going to relax a little bit more, and the hole might close up a bit. Don't worry about it. I mean, we're not making magazine-worthy bagels here. We're making bagels that our friends and family are gonna really love to eat. And nobody's gonna care if they don't look perfect. Okay, so all I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do that exact process 7 more times, and then I'll show you where we're at. So my bagels are all shaped. I just put them on my half sheet pan that I have another silicone baking mat on from Aldi. So over here on the stove, I have a pot of simmering water that I have added 3 tablespoons of brown sugar to. So here you have a few options. I really like using brown sugar. Honey is also delicious if you want to use that, or even maple syrup. You can also just use plain white sugar again. It kind of depends on what flavor you want on your bagels, because a little of it is going to come across. So if I were making bagels that were more whole wheat, I really like using honey. For plain bagels, I tend to prefer brown sugar. But if I were making maybe jalapeno cheddar bagels, I might just do plain sugar so you don't get an extra like flavor. But you just play with what you like, but you need something in this water. Some people get fancier and they add like brown or like baking soda or things like that. I don't mess with that because my family likes them this way. I don't need any extra work. Okay, so I'm gonna show you how to boil one bagel, and then I'll finish them and we'll come back and show you the next step. So I don't like to do a full rolling boil. I just like it to be bubbling and real steamy in there. And so what this does is it kind of sets the crust of your bagel so that you get that chew on the outside, and then the pull on the inside. So sometimes you'll put your bagels in and they're gonna sink. Sometimes they'll float right away. What mine just did is it sunk to the bottom and then popped up. All of that is okay. I mean, different days it will do different things. Don't worry about it so much one way or the other. So I just kind of let it sit on one side for about a minute, but I'm obviously not timing anything. It also depends if your water is like at a full rolling bubble, it doesn't need to sit that long. I could do probably 3 bagels in here at a time, but just to show you the one for simplicity's sake, I'm just gonna do 1 in there. And you'll be able to see the difference when I flip this bagel over. So I'm trying, how long do you think it's been?
30 seconds.
Okay, so we're gonna give it a little while longer. The temperature of your water is gonna drop when you throw your first bagel in. So I kind of think of it like this, you know, your first pancake is always different. Your first bagel is always gonna be different. Okay. So I'm literally just gonna flip this in the water now. Okay. So it looks a little different. Sometimes it's gonna look more bumpy. Sometimes it's gonna look more smooth. It just different days make different bagels. So there's no use getting stressed about it unless you're trying to open a bakery, you know? So I'm just gonna let this go for another, I don't know, 45 seconds in the water. Then I'm gonna scoop it out, put it back on my pan, and do the other 7. And then I'll come back and show you what it looks like and show you the next step. All right, so our bagels are all boiled now. I neglected to tell you before that if you want to put poppy seeds or everything bagel seasoning on top of your bagels, when you pull them out of the water and put them onto your sheet pan, that's the time to do it while they're still wet and steamy, because that'll help everything stick. I'm gonna leave my oven is preheated. I'm gonna leave these plain today, so I'm not gonna do anything extra. In the future, I'll make other videos on how to make different flavors of bagels as supplements to this video. But for today's purposes, these are just gonna be completely run-of-the-mill plain bagels. So at this point, my oven is preheated to 400 degrees Fahrenheit, and it's just time to bake these. They take about, I always forget, 25 minutes in the oven. I usually open my oven around minute 13, rotate my pan because I know my oven has a hot spot in the back. So play around with it. You're gonna have to figure out what works best in your oven, but at around 25 minutes, they should be done. If you want to test them, bread products should come up to 190. So if you use an instant read thermometer in one of them, 190 degrees, you're good to go, but they should look brown before you pull them out. If you want a really shiny bagel top, you can use an egg wash. I typically skip that because it's just for looks, so I save my eggs. All right, so I'm just gonna put these in the oven, let them go for 25 minutes, and then we'll show you what we've got. All right, guys, so I just pulled our bagels out of the oven. They are not my prettiest bagels, but it doesn't matter because they're gonna taste really good. So they're just browned up on the top. This one, I don't know. It didn't do its job. It didn't get brown, but who cares? And like I said, some of these holes have closed up. Don't worry about it. Everybody is gonna just love that you made them bagels. So some of them are prettier than others. They're all different sizes. Like I said, you can measure them and weigh them if you want them to look more uniform. If you want them to look shiny like you get at a bakery, just use an egg wash. But I'm gonna keep updating you guys on different videos on how you can flavor your bagels and how you can do different things with very similar dough. So check back. If you have any questions, feel free to email us at ailenada@gmail.com or leave us a comment. I'm going to spell out this recipe in the description box, so don't worry if you didn't write it down as we went. So if you have any questions or requests for specific videos, let us know, and have a great holiday season. Happy baking.